Welcome to the King's Table, a podcast out of Kings Hill Church in Boston, where we seek to elevate the Bible over opinion, answering the questions you have. I'm your host, Jonathan Mosley. Today we have with us Betsy Bullock. We've had the privilege of having her on the podcast before. She's the founder of Small Enough Ministries and serves as one of the main leaders for the college ministry at Perkinsville Church in Boone, North Carolina. This episode is a discussion around campus ministry and the local church. As a student, how should I be thinking about where to invest my time? Enjoy. Betsy, thanks again for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, I loved it the last time, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation and gleaning wisdom from you and kind of sharing my failures and also my victories in this kind of balancing act that we have.
Well, Betsy, I'm really here to get wisdom from you, right? One reason why I really wanted to have you on is because you have your hands really in both places. You're investing heavily in the local church at Perkinsville with college girls, but you're also working alongside campus ministry leaders at Appalachian State. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what you do in Boone.
Yeah, so I currently serve as the college minister at Perkinsville Baptist Church in Boone, and really that's 10 hours a week for me, and we know that that's, you can kind of laugh at that. It all kind of molds together, which is really beautiful. And then I serve as the founder of Small Enough Ministries, which really reaches all women with the gospel. We really seek to equip the laborer and engage the lost on the campuses of Appalachian State, Lee's McRae College, and then really across the country. And so I have my hands in both, but my deepest and greatest love, of course, other than the Lord, is the local church.
Mm. Yeah, let's try to put some words to that, right? I think when I was in college, campus ministry, local church, I just didn't have a good grasp on. I couldn't really give you much of an explanation as to what those differences were. So how would you, Betsy, just define those terms for us? Local church, campus ministry. Yeah, help us understand that.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'll say how I first I grew up in the local church, was a church kid. Anytime the doors were open, I was there and really loved it. And then I went to college and I went to Liberty and became a part of some campus ministries and some of those things, and really kind of didn't understand the importance of a local church. And so when I graduated, I had no idea what I was looking for because there was no more campus ministries, right? You're in the workforce, and so as somebody in the workforce, you don't find a campus ministry. You don't know how to look for a local church. And so really, I think for me, as I started to study the importance of the local church, I realized that Christ died for the church. Like, the church is the bride. And Paul, anytime he wrote an epistle or he left a city, it was because a church was established there. Not a campus ministry, not a parachurch ministry, but a church. And I think the beauty of the church is it's every tribe, every nation, every tongue, every age, every color, everything that comes together. And that is so very different from the experience of a campus ministry. The church is the body and the beauty of Christ that we see that you won't find at a campus ministry.
Yeah, I love campus ministry. My life really, my faith, I should say, really took off in college. I was part of a Christian fraternity, and some of my best friends to this day came out of that fraternity. Just absolutely loved it. But I'd say, like you mentioned, out of college, that's where my understanding of the local church really took off. For the first time, I had to work at building community. It was always it was a given for me. I mean, I'm living with roommates that are believers, and when I moved into the city of Boston for the first time, I have to work at this thing. Like you mentioned, there was no campus ministry, and really understanding the local church as a family.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the local church that with deacons and elders and leadership and oversight that is called to protect the witness of Jesus through being able to affirm and oversee people's faith. There's accountability there. There's a pursuit of holiness together, and those things you just it's hard to really put your finger on that with the campus ministry, because it tends to be people of the same age in one place, whereas the local church, there's offices that are there, deacon and eldership, but these are things that the Lord has prescribed for us, along with baptism and the Lord's Supper. These sacraments or ordinances that really draw lines around who belongs to Jesus and who doesn't. And so my understanding really exploded after college. But like
Mhm.
you mentioned, the beauty and the body, that's the church, and God provides leaders to oversee the members, but there's also a means by which that we can say this person truly is a member of the body of Christ
Mhm.
through the leadership that's in place and through other members that you don't necessarily get with the campus ministry. And let me ask you this, Betsy. Uh, there, there is not there's not a war between campus ministry and local church, right?
Right. Right.
We're all answering the calling we believe God's put in our lives to reach the campuses and to see the people of God built up and to grow into holiness. And uh, but they do have different functions. And you mentioned Jesus died for the local church.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I really see it as uh, something that's the main thing, and then a complement or supplement to the main thing.
Yes.
Local church is the main thing, and the supplement is other ministries that might spring from that.
Mhm.
For you, thinking about local church campus ministry, when have you seen that relationship at its best, and when have you seen it at its worst?
Yeah, so I'll start with at its worst, because this is actually something that I initially, when I first moved to Boone and first kind of began to work with college students through small enough ministries, I really failed at. And so you can learn from my failure this morning, and also the Lord's grace in that failure. And so for the first 2 years of small enough kind of working in Appalachian State, Perkinsville was kind of over here and small enough was here. And what I found was we were seeing the Lord do great and mighty things. We were seeing through our Bible study with small enough, we were seeing students coming, but the problem was no student was able to really work out their spiritual gifts. I mean, the church is a beautiful place where you can see spiritual gifts come. And
Mm,
and so they weren't able to, they were coming and they were soaking up the word like a sponge, but they were having nowhere to release it. And they were being trained as soldiers, but the ultimate training I really believe comes from the church, right, where you see a mother loving on her children, so that this college student can see that, or you see a
mm,
father loving on his son and loving on his wife, or you see a single woman in her 40s serving the homeless, right? And so my students, they were only seeing one area of spiritual gifts, they were only seeing one area of teaching. And so I was really, in a way, short circuiting their spiritual growth by keeping the two separate.
mm,
And that was a huge failure on my end. And so we were a bunch of, I mean, I was in my 30s, but they were a bunch of 19 and 20 somethings that had a lot of things in common. They were either athletes or they were in the same major. And so nobody was rubbing up against them, challenging the belief systems that they had. Everybody was in agreement, right? It was this beautiful picture of we're all in Boone, and the fall is here and we all love Appalachian State football, and nobody's disagreeing, right? And then so I think it's the beauty of iron sharpening iron
mm,
that really fails when a campus ministry that I was a part of, that I was founded, had not come alongside the church. And really I had no authority over these group of girls. That's the church. The church is the authority where discipline, where sharpening, where gifts are dispersed, where people see the body in its fullness. And so what I found was a lot of girls were treating our Wednesday night Bible study like their church. And then they were graduating and they had no more Betsy Bullock. They had no more small enough ministries. They had no more roommates to bounce off the book of John with. And so they had no idea how to find a
mm,
church. And so where they were really high in their walk, they went deep down into a spiral where they were looking for a person and not the Prince of Peace, which I think is really found in the church. And I think what you said was such a great point, that we are on the same team. We are in the same war. We are battling together. I mean, we are meant to be warriors alongside one another. But I think that the issue is that I'm just another soldier. And really, I think the commanders of the armies are the elders and the pastors. And so it is my job, as somebody, to take wisdom and direction from them to lead other soldiers. But ultimately, my authority is the church, whose ultimate authority is God. And that's a beautiful hierarchy. And I had really short circuited that. And so 2 years into Small Enough, I started to say, wait a minute, like, this is a problem. We are seeing girls in particular not walking with Jesus well. And some were, but not walking with Jesus well after graduation. And so really had some hard conversations with my pastor, and we really said, let's bring this under the authority of the local church. And that's where Perkinsville College Ministry and Small Enough united. And I will say this, it is the most beautiful marriage that God has instituted. It is not in opposition, it is in obedience, where we see the fullness of the gospel, where students are encouraged to be missionaries on Outstate's campus, and they are encouraged by the local church to do that.
I love that. Uh, Kind of a similar story for me when I went to the University of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time in the campus ministry, but when I got out of that ministry and moved to Boston, I realized that I had stunted my growth. You
Mm-hmm.
used the word short circuited. It's something very similar, just stunning my growth because, like you had mentioned, I was never challenged to love people that were unlike me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I'm gonna grow in my ability to love people, well, I need to be introduced to people that are different than me ethnically,
Yes.
racially, economically, and I got to learn to serve and sacrifice for them, people that aren't different, that people that are different from me. I never had that opportunity, so my capacity to love, that my growth was stunted.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, uh, before I became a father and a husband, I just and this was post college. I wish I would have done this in college, because the church I was a part of, Watkinsville Baptist, oh my goodness, it's just an amazing church filled with incredible wisdom. But it wasn't until after college where I began in a local church setting to hang out with fathers and husbands and people that had survived faith battles,
Yes.
right? Like they're people that are 50, 60, 70 years old. They've trusted God through cancer. They've trusted God through their spouses passing away. And they've hung on to God in the midst of their tragedies, faith battles. And I'm hanging out with college students, and they've had some battles, but not nearly as many as the collective church. And so I started my growth in that sense of when I was uh, at UGA, God had provided this wealth of knowledge, of relationships, of just a treasure chest, really, and I just didn't take advantage of it like I should have. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would do that differently. Well, where have you seen the campus ministry, local church relationship at its best?
Oh man, the thing that I love, and I see it a lot with our students, is is when I see Perkinsville post a picture of a student serving in our vacation Bible school, or teaching little kids in Awana, or holding babies in nursery, or sitting next to a 75-year-old widow who is teaching them how to quilt, right? And there is something that just thrills and excites me, that me, as a part of Small Enough, I, by God's grace, was able to enter Appalachian State's campus, and by God's grace was able to see that student, meet that student, see that student come to know Jesus, and then by his grace take that student into a local body where the body can love on her.
Mm,
And I think that's where it works the best, because Perkinsville is not always going to be able to go to Appalachian State, right? That 75-year-old woman who knits and quilts, she's not going to go to Appalachian State, but small enough is, right? And so, but small enough, the one of the greatest things is that I can then take that student to Perkinsville Baptist Church, so that when that student graduates and small enough is no longer a part of their life, they can go to Watkinsville Baptist in Georgia, and they can sit with a 75-year-old woman that knits, and they can hold babies in the nursery, because God used small enough to plant the seed of the gospel. And he used a 90-year-old woman or a 9-year-old little girl to water that seed. And God gave the growth. And so I think that's when it works the best, is when I see myself as a hand, but I don't forget that the hand needs the arm,
mm.
right? And that, I think, is the problem, is that God has knit us together. And when we see each other as fellow, like you said, I love that analogy of fellow soldiers. We're not, I think too, a lot of times where I see it in, particularly in campus ministry, and I can say this because I'm a part of a campus ministry, is we vie for students in numbers, and especially at support raising ministries, right? We need the numbers. When in reality, this isn't about numbers. This is about the gospel.
Mhm.
And when we see that, we rejoice when that student is more invested at Perkinsville than they are at Small Enough, because God used Small Enough to take that student to the church. And that's what we want. God using the campus ministry to drive that student to the church.
I love that's where I see the relationship at its best,
The
right?
best.
Because like you mentioned, uh, oftentimes the church is going to get a no if they try to establish anything on the campus, and not
Mhm.
everybody from a church can get to that campus.
Right.
But I think college students are going to be best equipped to reach other college students,
Mhm.
and that's also going to come through a campus ministry.
Yep.
And so when it comes to evangelism, well, I think that's a strength that a campus ministry has that maybe a local church doesn't on a college campus. But when I was kind of like you, when I was involved in campus ministry, my goal was they're growing if they become less involved with this campus ministry and more involved in the
Yep.
local church, because that's and so that would be a huge win. Is where, all right, like now that they've come to faith in Jesus, I want them to grow now in the context of a local church. Then
Mhm.
the campus ministry is not going to be their best place of growth. The local church is.
Right.
But then the local church becomes the home base, the headquarters, where then they send the students back out to their campus.
Mhm.
And so the campus ministry becomes the front lines for the campus into reaching students, but their support, the place to retreat, the place to be edified, is back to, like missionaries being furloughed, they're coming back now to the church to be cared for, refreshed, then be sent back out.
Yes.
And that's where I see just the ways that the local church and campus ministry can really work together.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, one a concern that I do have is when that's not there, when a campus ministry is not under a local church, it discipleship becomes really difficult.
Yes.
If I'm a senior and I'm in a leadership position and I'm discipling freshmen and sophomores, but I go to one church that teaches something in particular, and then the next year that junior becomes a senior and they're teaching those same students, but they go to a different church with different theology. Well, where's the continuity of discipleship? It's not there.
Mhm.
But you don't have to worry about that when it's driven by a local church. There's one vision behind all that's happening.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's huge. Like, I think something that I've learned is to celebrate when a student is like, you know what, I really just want to serve at Perkinsville. Awesome. Like, that's a win for Small Enough. And I think a lot of times, a lot of campus ministries, and how I first started out, we see that as a loss. And really, it's not, because I know that Perkinsville is ultimately under the authority of an association, which is ultimately under the authority of an association. And I know that those things won't change. But if I were to pass away, and go be with the Lord, and somebody else took over Small Enough, well, who's that authority, right? Things can change. It's not a solid foundation. And again, going back to what Paul said, he didn't leave until a church was established. right? And so I think that is so important, is that every ministry for which we do should come forth from the establishment of a church, because that's what Acts is all about, right? The Acts of the Apostles is they are out not for separate ministries, but for the universal church,
Mm.
that they would know God. And so discipleship should always happen under the sphere of a local church, whether that's crew or small enough, or campus outreach. All of those I love them. Some of my dearest friends serve in those ministries, and I serve in a ministry like that. But I always want to say to my pastor, tell me how you want me to disciple. Tell me what you think about this. Deacons, elders, everybody. It is a joint effort. And I think that's how it should be.
That's great. That's great. Well, Betsy, the reason we had this question in the first place is because it's been asked, and the question usually comes in the form of, hey, I'm a student. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to invest my time. What recommendations, encouragements, warnings, what would you give to me in regards to that question, that concern? So I just want to pose that for you, a student trying to figure out where to invest his or her time. How would you encourage them?
Well, the first thing that I always want to tell students is to find a local church first, like, and to understand and know that no church is perfect. But I always tell a student, go and find a local church, be a part of that local church, find out what they believe, meet with the pastor. If first of all, if the pastor won't meet with you, you probably shouldn't be going to that church, right? Like, go and sit down with the pastor. Go and sit down with a deacon or an elder. Be a part of a local church. And if you find a campus ministry, find a campus ministry that is pointing you to a church. And serve in that church that campus ministry is under. Because I think what's so crucial and key is a lot of times students, they think they're at a university to get a degree, and that is definitely part of it. Parents, don't hear me say that that's not. But they are on mission while they're completing their major, right? While they're getting a degree, they're on mission. And if they won't serve now, they won't serve when they graduate. And a lot of times they walk into a campus ministry wanting to be served, right? We all do. And I think the church calls us to service, where I think a lot of times, unfortunately, a campus ministry can cause us to feel served. And so I would say, become a part of a local church and use the gifts that God has given you. There is nothing that makes me feel like more of a part of the body than teaching a women's Bible study at my church, or doing nursery, right? You feel a part of something, a part of a family of God. And so I really want to challenge and encourage students that find a local church first. And then if you happen to see a campus ministry, that's great. Join that too. But serve the church most importantly.
I love that. I love in particular what you said about being on mission, no matter where we're at.
Yeah.
And as we're going, make disciples. So
Mm-hmm.
as I'm going to school and getting my degree, I'm making it, that mission never stops.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the local church as the really the foundation, the catalyst for that.
Mm-hmm.
Betsy, this has been great. Like you have mentioned, some of my dearest friends are in campus ministry and in the local church, and just applaud the work that they're all doing, because when you're on the front lines of seeing the church grow, and when you're in wanting the people to fall more in love with Jesus, and when you're on the campus and wanting to see people far from God come into the family of God, this is hard work. It's just
Mm-hmm.
hard work. And so we celebrate every calling that God has given to someone who really has said, I want to live my life on mission in whatever form that looks like. But love the emphasis that you've put on the local church, that which Jesus died for. And it's been a great discussion. Thanks for coming on and joining us today.
Yeah, I've loved it. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's talk around campus ministry in the local church. Glad that you could join us at the King's Table. You can find more information and resources from Kings Hill Church at www.kingshillboston.com.